All right. What's up, Cinepals? I am Jabby Coy, joined by ACHARA KIRK.
What's up?
We're watching Last of Us Episode 6 breakdown, Easter eggs, and ending explained from ScreenCrush. Thanks so much, ScreenCrush, for allowing us to react to this. Very much appreciate it, y'all. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, bell icon, all notifications. Pretty please, vote this up. Let YouTube know you're enjoying what you're watching. While you subscribe and upvoting, subscribe to ScreenCrush. Link in the description below. If you want to click on that link, give the original video an upvote, and subscribe to him from there. Here we go.
I couldn't think of anything to say. I was so afraid.
Me too.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Arey, and this is all the Easter eggs, references, and little things that you might have missed in The Last of Us Episode 6, Kin. Now, the title of the episode, Kin, has a couple of different meanings. Where I'm from, kin means someone who is part of your family.
That's
but
what
kin
it means
can
to me
also
too.
mean to make someone your family, as in Joel kins Ellie. Kin can also mean similar to, as in akin to something. So, put all these together, and this episode is about families, both literal families and found families.
Exactly.
Remember, a couple episodes ago, Ellie asked Joel, what's the point of going on if you're just gonna die?
If you don't think there's hope for the world, why bother going on? I mean, you gotta try, right?
Keep going for family.
Now, at the time, Joel specifically said that Ellie was not family, she was cargo. But they've been through a lot since then, and this episode is when Joel finally admits to himself that Ellie is now his kin. And we see other groups of families throughout this episode: the farmer and his wife, Tommy and Joel, and the found family of the people of Jackson.
I'm ordering lunch. Do you want anything?
No, I'm good, I brought my own.
What?
Person? Are you eating raw
He's
pancakes?
committed to.
No,
Customers
Person.
don't want to see that. You start eating better or you're fired.
I'm sorry, I'll work harder. Back to what I was saying.
That was a joke? I thought that was going to lead into like some kind of an advertisement.
It might be setting up an ad, but that was really funny. I love that the dog was like, person, are you okay? Human, are you okay?
Yeah.
We start on the image of a hunter with two white rabbits, and I believe that at first we were meant to think that this is Joel. After all, later on he does talk
Or
about
Ellie.
living a solitary life like this.
Ranch.
Cool. What kind?
Sheep.
But also, this couple is living in a sanctuary that is built on love. Now think about where we've seen this before, with Bill and Frank, and in this episode in Jackson. Sanctuaries built on love and cooperation thrive, while Fedra falls. Now all of this is the
Interesting.
opposite of Kansas City. There, Fedra enforced a brutal law that began a brutal revolution. And then Kathleen was too consumed with hate to deal with the zombies that were literally under her feet. Eventually,
Right.
these zombies were released by the literal and metaphorical fires of her hatred, and Kansas City fell. And in this episode, we see the contrast of that in Jackson. But first, we meet the couple in a cabin, Marlon and Florence.
Hey, Marlon, he looks familiar. Who is that?
That is the legendary Graham Greene, who you might remember from Dances with Wolves.
Oh, shit.
I'm so glad he mentioned that because I was like, who is this actor? Why does he look so
No.
familiar?
Oh,
I
yeah,
feel like
the
he's
good
been
guy.
in
That's right.
everything.
The opening has a couple similarities with the games. There's the long time jump into a new season, and also, when it becomes winter in the game, the first image you see is of Ellie killing a white rabbit.
Correct.
Joel intrudes on Marlon and Florence because he's lost.
I need you to tell us where we are.
If you got a map, why you lost?
And I just want to point out he is not lost in the game.
Please tell me you're lost.
We didn't know the place was occupied. We're just trying to make our way through.
Now, Marlon and Florence think that past the river is filled with bandits and death because,
We never seen who's out there, but we see the bodies they leave behind.
but remember, the people of Jackson dump the bodies there, so people will think that this place is dangerous. Now, they actually do something similar in the game, allowing the infected to roam around the city to deter bandits.
I actually had gone through the footage of the game for that section of the story one more time just to see what the differences were. I had considered making a comparison video between the game and the show, and then I saw like a bunch of people did. I'm like, it's fine. I don't need to make it. Totally don't need to waste time doing that. The things he pointed out were accurate. I mean, the interesting thing is you don't actually hit winter until after this episode in the game. After Joel passes out, that's when you enter winter. Whereas here in the show, they decided to start with that, which actually makes the journey that much more harrowing.
Now, back to Joel being lost. This is an interesting change from the game because it reflects where he is emotionally. But we're going to talk about that just a little later in the video. The opening scene also establishes the importance of trust in a relationship. Joel wants the same directions from both people. And Marlon asks his wife,
Are you telling me the truth?
Yeah?
it's pretty clear that these two people trust one another, and they know each other so well that they're practically the same human. And we see this same trust through the community of Jackson, where everyone shares what they have, and by the end of the episode, that same trust exists between Joel and Ellie. And you know what? This line?
Not the bugs, the people.
There are firefly people?
I mean, look, with all the weird monsters roaming around the land, that's not the weirdest thing that could happen out there. So
Yeah.
outside, Joel has a panic attack.
Are you dying?
Okay, I'm okay. I'm fine.
The last time we saw him have one of these, it was when the soldier pulled a gun on Ellie, which triggered his memories of Sarah's death. For years, Joel was able to bury his trauma by burying his memories of Sarah. But as he gets closer to Ellie, he is feeling those same emotions, so it's resurrecting these same traumas. Now, every time he goes someplace normal, like the cabin or Jackson, it's dredging up his memories of the old world, which makes him relive this trauma. Last week, we talked about how the Excellent channel, Filmwise, pointed out that Joel shows his love through protection.
Oh, he loves you.
He's dependent on me. Not the same.
I think it's the same.
It's definitely the same.
Now, in his sleep, he relives the worst moment of his life, when he failed to protect Sarah from harm. And now he is afraid that he's too old and deaf to protect Ellie. The show has been drawing subtle parallels between Ellie and Sarah since the first episode. Sarah has a butterfly pillowcase, and when Ellie has her first private conversation with Joel, she is sitting next to a butterfly. And Ellie doesn't make Joel's panic attack any better when she says,
No, when are you? Because just remind me that if you're dead, I'm
I'm fine.
Joel was always able to face death when his own life was on the line, but he is terrified of failing someone he loves. Again, Ellie also keeps calling the river
River of Death,
which is a neat nod to the river Styx from Greek mythology. Now, according to myth, you have to cross this river to enter the afterlife. Just as, after Joel and Ellie cross, they can enter the heavenly paradise of Jackson. It's probably also worth mentioning that Achilles obtained his powers when he was dipped into the river Styx. So it is a river of death, but it can also offer you invulnerability if you have the courage to face it.
I just got excited because of Percy Jackson. Anyone who reads those books, you'll know. I hadn't thought about that parallel between the river of death and the river Styx. That's really cool that he picked up on that. I hope that this means that Joel comes out on the other side stronger.
In this case, Joel and Ellie face this trial and then they get a reward. Now, I mentioned a little bit ago that Joel shows love through protection, but he also uses protection as a way to distance himself from people. If you're protecting someone, then you're not relying on them. They rely on you. So with Ellie, he refuses to allow her to do adult things. He doesn't want to teach her to kill rabbits.
That is interesting.
We can get our own rabbits.
You're gonna teach me how?
Just keep moving.
And at first, he doesn't want her to drink.
Can I have some?
No.
But eventually, he not only teaches her to shoot, but he enjoys it, taking a kind of fatherly pride when she makes progress. And speaking of progress, Ellie is starting to wonder how their journey can end. If the Fireflies are able to use her blood to make a vaccine, what kind of life could they build for themselves in the new world? So the idea of a future has never been an option for Joel until now. But since they're actually in Wyoming, the future seems closer than ever.
Real quick on what he just mentioned, because he flew past a moment where Ellie says, she looks up at the moon, she wishes she could be an astronaut. She names off some astronauts, including Sally Ride. And in the game, this actually takes place when they reach the university. And it's more of a calm conversation, kind of upbeat, after Joel has agreed to continue going on this journey with Ellie. Instead, they put it at the campfire where there's this look of uncertainty with Ellie, and she's just wondering if this is actually going to work, because there's no point in these lofty ambitions of becoming an astronaut if this cure is not going to work. I thought that was just an interesting way to kind of move it around.
It's cool as well, just the difference in their desires, because Joel's desire is really down to earth. It's just like, well, I'd just live by myself and I'd have a ranch with some sheep. Her aspirations are way more lofty and in a way much more childlike. It's like, even if you did have a vaccine, how long would it be until we could have space travel again?
Sure.
Safe and isolated.
An old farmhouse, some land, ranch.
Because up until now, his entire goal has been protection and security. He even says that he wants to raise sheep.
I would raise sheep. They're quiet. Do what they're told.
I love the little affectionate smile he gives Ellie after. It's like a subtle sign of their growing bond. And notice how, even at this point, Joel is maintaining the emotional barrier between them.
Like, what do we do?
Well, it's we.
Now, Joel's answer is perfect for a man who has lived a hard life who is now looking for peace. The kind of peace that Marlon and Florence have back at that cabin. But Ellie can't help but mock his supposed desire for isolation.
So, just you and a bunch of sheep. Romantic.
But look, behind this joke, she is saying that Joel's life of solitude is really no life at all. Unlike Joel, Ellie is a dreamer who sees endless possibilities in the world.
It's your first time in a car?
It's like a spaceship.
She mentions,
I read everything I could in the school library. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Jim Lovell. But you know who my favorite is?
Ellie Ride.
And they were the first and second humans to land on the moon, and Jim Lovell commanded the Apollo 13 mission as dramatized by Tom Hanks.
Houston, we have a problem.
But her favorite astronaut was Sally Ride, the first woman in space, and also she was played by Ellen Rowe in For All Mankind, one of the best shows on television. So in The Last of Us 2, there is a cute cutscene where Joel and Ellie visit an old museum where they sit in a capsule and pretend to go to space. So this conversation is an awesome callback to that scene. But even in all this daydreaming, they're starting to have doubts.
I tried with Sam.
Up until now, they've had blind faith in the idea of a cure, but now that they're close, they're starting to wonder, what if? What if we win? What if we lose? And for Joel, he's thinking, what if I fail Ellie like I failed Sarah? Joel replies,
Well, I reckon it's a lot more complicated than that.
Gamers know. As Joel takes his watch, he tells Ellie,
Dreamer.
I think he's definitely trying to ignore the possibility of giving a spoiler away.
Yeah, no, I get it, because I don't know.
Yeah. It's an involved thing I'm not going to get into.
As Joel takes his watch, he tells Ellie,
Dreamer. Sheep ranch is on the moon.
which is a lovely combination of their two dreams of the future. Now this shows that
it's cute.
subconsciously, Joel is starting to think of he and Ellie having a shared future together. Now I mentioned earlier that Joel did not want to treat Ellie like an adult because then he would have to rely on her. Reliance leads to need, and need leads to affection and love, which Joel still has to cut himself off from. Still, his age catches up to him and he falls asleep. But Ellie is there to protect him. She follows his lessons.
Check my sticks, I looked for tracks, I found the high ground, and I kept watch.
Now later in the episode, she continues to protect him, warning him of an attack that he can't hear coming.
Yep. Jump! And then she's on the back
And then there's
shooting.
that ending, which I'm going to go over a little later. So even though Ellie is becoming a capable fighter, Joel still doesn't want to rely on her.
Wake me up next time.
They have a conversation about dressing a deer.
What's the dressing?
The part where you take the guts out.
Oh yeah.
And actually, we saw a dressed deer outside the cabin at the very start of the episode. So Joel talks about removing the deer's guts. It implies that Ellie doesn't have the stomach for this. But later, we see that Joel is impaled in the guts, and Ellie is going to have to deal with that fallout herself. So the two of them come across a dam.
Damn.
Where, like in the game, Joel admits that he has no idea how electricity works.
So that made electricity?
Don't ask me, I don't have a clue.
Look, I know what it is.
He explained it a little bit. In the game, he explained it a little bit.
Right there's a hydroelectric power plant. It uses the river's movement and turns it into electricity.
They just truncated it down to, don't ask me, I don't know what it is. I don't know how it works. He mentioned a moment ago with the deer, and I just remembered that when you hit winter, the first thing you see is Ellie like pierce a rabbit with her arrow. But then following that, she spots a deer and you have to hunt it as Ellie. And so I don't know if that's like a little nod to the gamers who are watching the show, or if it's just a coincidence, or if those are the only two things you'll ever see in a forest during the snow.
Yeah, I don't know. But I also really liked the parallel that he's making between Joel not wanting to teach Ellie just because he wants to feel in control and like the one who's doing the protecting, right? And if he's the one doing the protecting, then he doesn't need to rely on someone, and then there's no love there. There's no connection there. The whole time when I was watching it, I was like, why doesn't he just teach her? You know, they always say like, what is that saying about teaching someone to fish?
Lead a man to fish, and then he can feed himself for a day.
Yes,
That one.
give a man a fish and he'll feed himself.
The dam is actually where he is reunited with Tommy, and it's like a whole level where you fight off invaders. In the show, though, Jackson gets their power from the dam, but it's unguarded. When they do run across the guards, Joel's PTSD kicks in. So the guards have this dog who is trained to smell the cordyceps fungus. Now, contrast this with Fedra, who had like fancy digital scanners that detected the fungus in your blood. Their scanners showed that Ellie was positive, while the dog instinctively knows that Ellie is safe to be around. It is interesting that the bad guys, Fedra, rely on technology, but the good guys from Jackson detect the virus with dogs, because dogs are in a mutually beneficial relationship with humans, just as the people of Jackson all work for one another, whereas Fedra uses people like tools. But there's other contrasts between Fedra and Jackson I'm going to go over just a little bit later. So this event with the dog reminds Joel of two traumatic events: the death of Sarah, when another man with a gun pointed a gun at a teenager in his care, and also to the soldier outside the QZ, when Joel had his flashback to Sarah's death. And then we actually get to enter the town of Jackson. So in the games, you just kind of look at it before moving on to Colorado. But I'm glad that they gave Joel and Ellie a chance to regroup. There's always a part of the hero's journey where the heroes meet with the helper, sometimes called the goddess. It's the place that gives them the option of safety before they choose to move on into even darker trials. In Lord of the Rings, it's Galadriel, Lothlorien. In Star Wars, it's Luke on the way to Alderaan, and here it's Jackson. Now there are several clues that connect this place to a sense of safety and belonging. There's the sheep that Joel wants to raise.
Hey Joel, check it.
Also, there's this place called the Settler's Cabin, which implies Jackson is a kind of larger version of the cabin sanctuary at the start of this episode. So feeling safe and normal, like I said, brings up all these memories for Joel, which in turn leads to him strengthening his bond with Ellie. And this prepares Ellie for the trial that she is about to face next episode, when she will have to take care of Joel.
One of the things he mentioned that was important was that you don't actually get to explore the town in Last of Us Part 1. That's saved for Part 2. He also mentioned briefly how there was a whole bunch of action they just blew past. There's like all the shootouts from bandits in, conducting a raid on the dam. What's interesting about the game versus the show in this particular instance, if you guys care, you can skip past this part if you don't care, is that Joel is shown what's going on in the dam with the hydropower plant stuff. Tommy's showing him like, oh, we're trying to do this and this and this. It went down 6 times. We're going to do it again and get it back up and running. And it gives the impression that they are just starting to get this thing up and running. They are just starting to get normalcy again. Versus in the show, it's like, oh yeah, 7 years ago we figured all this out. And it's like, it's been this way for a while in the show. And I think that's just an interesting dichotomy.
But also, being in Jackson gives the heroes new stakes. They can see the kind of world that they're fighting for. If the vaccine works, then communities like this could appear all over the country and they can rebuild. Now, you get to see more of Jackson in The Last of Us 2. This bar, the Tipsy Tyson, that's from the game. And there are other similarities like the lights strung up over town and all the animal pens. And I could be wrong, but I think that the girl in the bar watching Ellie is Dina.
That's what I thought
very
too.
Close to in the next game. Oh, and of course, Shimmer is the one that she rides in The Last of Us 2.
I did wonder because I recognized the name.
Is people working together and cooperating to build up their town. Contrast this with Kansas City, where the first thing they saw was their attackers. Whereas here, they immediately see family. So the scene where Tommy and Joel greet each other is pretty much lifted from the game, with Tommy even wearing the same denim jacket. He tells him,
I'm here to save you.
because Joel has always had to save Tommy. Remember, in the first episode, Tommy has to call Joel to get him out of jail. But more importantly is the reason Tommy is in jail. When an infected attacked a woman in a bar, Tommy stepped in to save her. Tommy is always the type to step up and save others. Like Joel said,
Tommy's what we used to call a joiner.
now because Tommy always wants to help people, that is why Joel asked him to take Ellie to Colorado later on.
You want me to take her?
Tommy is married to Maria, but in the game, she is like the leader of Jackson. Here, she's more humble.
No one person's in charge. I'm on the council.
And Maria is played by Rutina Wesley, who you may recognize from HBO's True Blood. Now, all of this is slowly revealed over a meal when Ellie has to remind Joel of his manners.
Joel, say congrats.
God, and I love all the emotions that are playing under the surface here. Once Joel's initial relief from seeing Tommy wears off, he starts to resent him. Why didn't Tommy tell him that he was alive? Or that he found this sanctuary? Why does Tommy get to live a happily ever after with the wife and baby and Joel has to suffer? What's he going to get in return? All of these emotions come bubbling to the surface throughout this episode. And the rifle that Tommy describes,
Still got my 700, but I found a variable power scope. Sub-MOA.
is a Remington Model 700, which is used by snipers in the U.S. Marine Corps and the military. It's also the bolt-action rifle that appears in the Last of Us game that we talked about last week. And we keep talking about how this show has a theme of losing and regaining your humanity. The fungus that invades people's bodies is symbolic of the hate that infects our souls. Both rob us of our literal and symbolic humanity. Jackson is the definition of humanity. They continually show one another love by working together to create a better life for each other. And then Tommy just really twists the knife.
I'm going to be a father.
And Joel feels jealous and cheated that Tommy gets to have the life that was stolen from him. Tommy says,
Just because life stopped for you doesn't mean it has to stop for me.
And just like we've talked about, that life stopping is symbolized by Joel's broken watch. He still wears the watch as a reminder of his grief, and it shows how he can never move on from his pain. The longer he is in like these real life, more normal circumstances, the more Joel thinks of Sarah. He sees a girl that looks like her, and he briefly imagines that she is alive. Joel's love for Ellie is slowly breaking down this facade he's built around himself until he finally breaks down again. Meanwhile, Ellie's getting a taste of the good life, and now she has a maternal influence who's given her a diva cup, but she can't resist playing with it. Oh, he's young at heart, that one. Now notice that when she goes to Maria's house, there's a stained glass image of some flowers. Victoria Barclay on Twitter pointed out that these are peace lilies. Flowers are symbolic of femininity, growth, and community. They are a plant that serves little functional purpose apart from showing love and making a home. It's why Frank wanted to plant them around their house.
It's how we show love.
Peace lilies in particular symbolize
war, famine, and disease.
No, peace. Why? Never mind. Inside, Ellie sees a Scrabble board, which is another subtle sign of civilization. Scrabble is a game that's about math, reading, spelling, all luxuries that you can indulge in when you're no longer having to scrape a living off the land. And then Maria gets her cleaned up and gifts her with a large purple coat.
It's super f***ing purple.
Now, purple is a symbol of royalty and luxury. This symbolizes how Ellie is now in these luxurious surroundings, but also Maria's role as a leader in the town. And then she finally tells Ellie about Sarah.
Sarah was Joel's daughter.
And this little bit of knowledge is starting to break down the final barrier between Joel and Ellie. Joel can no longer bury the existence of his daughter or the fact that Ellie reminds him of Sarah. This small bit of truth gives the two of them the tools to fully trust one another. But Maria gives her some important bit of advice.
The only people who can betray us are the ones we trust.
Now this will come into play later in the series, but I won't say how. But for now, it's a reminder of the episode's ongoing theme of showing how people form bonds when they truly rely on one another for safety.
The scene where Ellie's getting her hair cut by Maria, and she tells him about, or she tells her about Sarah. That's obviously not in the game because we're focused on Joel's journey, right? It's more of an off-camera thing. And so that's one of the cool things you are afforded with the TV show is scenes that you would normally not get to watch in the game. I also think it's good what the show has done in introducing Joel's weaknesses and his fear. You
Yeah.
know, because in the game, that's not present at all. Initially, I wasn't sure how I felt about it. I was kind of not 100% on board with it while appreciating it at the same time. I was of two minds about it. After having sat with the show in my mind, I was like, oh, it's actually helpful to the story, and it creates a stronger reason for Joel wanting to part ways with Ellie at this point in the journey. So having this thing inform his decision, I think, is a stronger choice.
The movie they're watching is called The Goodbye Girl, a 1977 film that Richard Dreyfuss won an Oscar for. The movie is about a single mom who is left by her boyfriend, a man that she trusted who betrayed her. And then Richard Dreyfuss moves in as a subletter and they form a kind of found family, very similar to the found family between Joel and Ellie. Now at first, Dreyfuss butts head with Marcia Mason and her daughter.
I play the guitar in the middle of the night whenever I cannot sleep.
And then he does leave them during the movie, just like Joel threatens to leave Ellie.
So long, kid.
But the movie ends with Richard Dreyfuss asking her to restring his guitar, implying that he does love her and he will return. And the inclusion of this guitar is an important nod to Joel. Later in the episode, after he started to feel safe and trust Ellie, he dreams less about survival and instead thinks about having fun.
When I was a kid, I wanted to be a singer.
Shut up.
And remember, in his house, we saw his guitar in this poster for the Austin City Limits. Now in the game, Joel actually plays guitar and teaches Ellie how to play as well.
Did I teach you how to play?
So, for both Joel and the Richard Dreyfuss character, music is used as an expression of love. And this episode is also key for Joel to finally have an emotional catharsis. After initially rejecting Tommy, Joel realizes that he is too old and tired to fight, physically and emotionally. Also, in the show, they decide to not stop in Jackson, but Tommy says,
Kids will be watching movies tonight.
so all these years, Joel has been able to bury his past because he's separated from the person who can share his grief with him. His brother is the only person alive who truly knows him, and he offers Joel a much-needed outlet for his emotions. Whether he knows it or not, Joel is craving an emotional connection. He needs to rely on someone for mutual benefit, so he finally tells the truth.
She's immune.
But Joel only reveals this out of desperation. He thinks that he cannot protect Ellie, and he's desperate to pawn off the responsibility to someone else. Now look, if I can get a little biblical here.
Go there, it's fine.
Thank you. Joel asking for Tommy to take his burden away is much like Christ in Gethsemane, praying to God to remove the burden of dying on the cross. I would have said this was a coincidence, but later in the episode, Joel gets speared in the side like Christ, which also happens in the game. Now, the episode's a lot of fun explaining what exactly Jackson is.
This is the commune. We're communists.
And notice that Tommy, who grew up during the Cold War, doesn't like that label.
Yeah.
And I know that socialism is a pretty charged word, and later Joel goes over a simplified explanation of how the US worked.
Some people wanted to own everything, and some people didn't want anyone to own anything at all.
Now, I actually think we're somewhere in between, but when Joel's talking about Jackson, he also says,
The country's too big for that.
so what we're seeing in Jackson is less of a communist society and more of a tribal society. In most indigenous cultures, everything was shared by the tribe, and the tribe raised the children together. And this can really only work in small communities like Jackson.
Or in worlds with unlimited resources, like in Star Trek.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, we see other utopian ideals in Jackson, like their multi-faith church. Now, then thousands of years of human civilization have kind of split us off into smaller homes and boxes away from that initial tribalism, and now we all work for a piece of the planet's resources. And this is how Fedra operates. People have to work for their ration cards, and the worse the job is, the more it pays. It's capitalism that is persisting in an age where capitalism no longer makes sense.
Careful.
I'm just saying that in a post-apocalyptic society, everyone benefits when you work together. Hell, look, they've even decorated an ATM machine for Christmas, and they also fly the American flag, and they are governed by a functional democracy, unlike Fedra. So then Tommy and Joel go for a drink, and it's telling that this booze is much better than the hooch that Joel has. Now at first, Joel lies to Tommy, going back to the episode's theme of trust.
So how's Tess?
Yeah.
She's fine. All right.
He doesn't know anything about this place or where Tommy's loyalties now lie, and he also sticks with his original story of Ellie from the first episode.
She's the daughter of some firefly muckety-muck.
This is why Joel confronts Tommy for cutting him out of his paradise, and Tommy explains that he did this because of Jackson's strict rules of no contact. Now this stings extra hard for Joel because in his mind, family always comes first.
Correct.
Time for family.
Joel has justified all the evil things he's done because it meant the continuing survival of his kin.
The things I did, Tommy, those things that you judge me for, I did those things to keep us alive.
Now, of course, Jesus was killed on the cross, which all.
I think that was an editing error.
Yeah, I think so.
Because I think that he was just trying to get this video out as fast as possible.
I know.
And his haste to get it public, I think that
We've all been there.
made the cut.
We've all been there. It's fine.
I don't know if he's going to go into it, but I think it's interesting how the argument between Joel and Tommy was split up into 2 scenes in the show. And I think it gives you a 1-2 punch because initially Joel is like not sure about Tommy. He's not sure if he can reveal everything to him. I mean, he lies about Tess. He lies about Ellie. You know, he's walking carefully because he's like, why didn't I get included in this situation here that you're living like you pointed out. That also gives you the ability for when the revelation happens about Ellie. In reviewing the game, like it worked for the game, but in reviewing the game, Tommy turns down helping Joel out with Ellie, taking her forward on this journey to save humanity. Tommy turns that down.
What makes you think I'd do this for you? You ain't talking about some walk in the park here.
Whereas in the show, when it's revealed to Tommy who Ellie is, it's like, you can't say no to that. That's right. Humanity at large is at stake here.
Yeah.
You cannot say no to that. So the way the show structured it, I think works cinematically. For the game, I like the way the show did it here because it's like once you are told this data, once you are told this information, you cannot turn it down. And whereas Tommy in the game totally does. He's like, take your supplies and go. I don't need to be part of this. It's like, be part of saving humanity? Are you kidding? I like how the show did it where Tommy's like, okay, I have to do this.
Now, of course, Jesus was killed on the cross, which ultimately led to his rebirth and resurrection. And Joel does experience a kind of spiritual rebirth in this episode. And later in the series makes a sacrifice for the sins of others that I won't say more on. Gamers know. God, how heartbreaking was it to hear Joel, a pillar of strength, break down like this?
Yeah. She had to shoot him to save me. I couldn't move. I couldn't think of anything to say. I was so afraid.
Joel is most terrified that he needs Ellie to survive, because that means that he is no longer strong enough to protect her, and for the first time since Sarah, he is afraid. The episode talks a lot about dreams of the future.
Maybe an old farmhouse, some land, a ranch.
But Joel's actual dreams when he's sleeping are still haunted by his past.
I just know that when I wake up, I've lost something.
And man, Pedro gets to act.
It's all I've ever done. It's failure. Again and again.
Now back at the house, Ellie finds a diary in a scene that's lifted from the game.
Is this really all they had to worry about?
Verbatim.
Boys, movies.
And then Joel and Ellie finally have an emotional catharsis that is lifted straight from the game. First, she misinterprets his desire to leave her behind.
No way, you're still here. If you're gonna ditch me, ditch me.
Admit that you wanted to get rid of me the whole time.
And then, just like in the game, Ellie cuts right to Joel's heart.
I'm not her, you know.
Joel responds with,
Maria told me about Sarah and...
Don't say another word.
And what happens next is crucial. Ellie keeps going.
I'm sorry about your daughter, Joel. But I have lost people too.
Now this is because Ellie is fearless, and she also understands who Joel really is. He's not a merciless killer, he's a protector, and she sees through his facade. Ellie, who represents the potential salvation for humanity, has always been able to identify the humanity in others. And these next lines are when they truly come to understand each other, as they start to share their traumas.
I'm sorry about your daughter, Joel, but I have lost people too.
You have no idea what loss is.
Everybody I've cared for has either died or left me.
Everyone except for you.
And just like in the game, they agree to go their separate ways. But in the game, this moment is interrupted by an action scene.
We are going our separate ways.
Get it together. We're not alone.
But the show gives the characters time to breathe and dwell on their emotions. Then Joel relives what I'm guessing is his last Christmas with Sarah, and he recalls hanging up an ornament. So the Christmas tree in town must have been triggering for him, which is why he mocked Tommy for having one.
Christmas trees and bacon. Pretty decent setup.
Now the next morning, Tommy picks up Ellie, but they find Joel in the stable ready to go. And you know what? Relationships are defined by your ability to survive a fight. So this scene shows just how close they've become.
You deserve a choice. I still think you'd be better off with Tommy.
Let's go.
And then we get these lovely scenes where their bond is at its strongest, and they are genuinely happy to be together. Their inner serenity is also reflected by how beautifully this is filmed. And by the way, if you're wondering how Ellie knows how to ride a horse, I think we're going to find out in the next episode. So on the ride, Joel starts to tell her about how the world worked in the past, including how football was played, just like in the game.
All those shots that he's going over right now, the serene shots of the city and whatnot, that actually is after the scene he just mentioned where Ellie and Joel have a fight. And then Joel and Tommy and Ellie have to like survive another raid with bandits and whatever. After that, they ride back to the town. That's the sequence where Joel is realizing just how much he cares about Ellie. It's this montage of them riding and seeing these beautiful shots of the forest and whatever. And you see this expression on Joel's face of like, I can't leave her. And it's this fleeting moment, and I liked it. It's so we lose it in the show for other things that are really cool. I'm just saying, like, they kind of repurpose things, and it's really cool to see how they repurpose it to serve a different objective.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I do like that they had the opportunity to allow the emotions to breathe, because it kind of gave us an opportunity to wonder what might happen as well. Like if he really seriously was going to be like, no, I'm abandoning you, or if he was going to do what we expected him to do, which was to be there for her.
So on the ride, Joel starts to tell her about how the world worked in the past, including how football was played, just like in the game.
Let me see if I get this straight. If you mess up your fourth down...
Yeah, this is verbatim.
Give the ball to the...
Yep.
So, basically just moving in one direction.
Basically, but violent.
But for the first time, he is telling her about his own life in the before time.
I just did my job.
Which was building?
That's right. Houses, doors, that kind of thing.
This is actually Joel starting to recognize Ellie as a full equal. There's a similar moment in Saving Private Ryan when Captain Miller finally shares what he did before the war.
I'm a school teacher. I teach English composition.
But like, Joel is also allowed to embellish how important he was.
Everybody loves contractors.
So in both Saving Private Ryan and in The Last of Us, sharing elements of the past connect you with people in the present.
Yeah.
So now, by finally talking about the past, Joel can work through his pain. And this frees him up to finally actually think about the future. So when they enter the university, they immediately start to talk about the future.
It's kind of sheep.
We'll see. It's so close to your dream.
And when Joel explains college, he says,
I think it was just as much about partying and finding themselves as anything else.
And this is when he reveals that he actually wanted to be a singer. See, as he starts to let go of his past, he can dream for a better future than just the boring sheep farm that he saw for himself before. Joel actually writes a song for Ellie in the games, and this is reflected in this episode when we see a songwriting sheet on the bulletin board in Ellie's room. So when they come to the university, there are many similarities to the games. There's the packing list.
Ain't nothing here but a bunch of medical mumbo-jumbo.
And the monkeys have been released by the lab techs before they moved out. But in the game, the monkeys are infected, and one of them bit the lead doctor before he could leave.
Anyone deserves to run free out there. Hey, easy. Oh no. It bit me.
And there's also the Firefly logos that are painted around everywhere. Now outside we see shooting pill boxes like the one that Bill should have built in the street outside his house. And just like in the game, Joel and Ellie work out that the Fireflies have moved on to Utah, except in the game you find out by like listening to these audio recorders. Then some bandits find them and Joel snaps this guy's neck, which is also a pretty common stealth move in the game.
Yeah.
And just like in the game, he gets stabbed in his side and Ellie is forced to take charge.
Yeah, but it's rebar instead of shit.
Now, the song at the end is a big clue that we're about to transition into Ellie driving the narrative. This is a cover of Depeche Mode's Never Let Me Down Again, the 80s song that closed out the first episode.
Okay.
The lyrics speak to the show's recurring themes of trust, reliance, and protection. I'm taking a ride with my best friend. I hope he never lets me down again. He knows where he's taking me where I want to be. Except, unlike in the first episode, those lyrics are not sung by Dave Gahan. They're sung by a woman, showing that now Ellie is the one who has to protect Joel.
There was a whole action sequence that takes place at that campus, and I knew that action was missing, but the degree to how much was missing was a little startling when I rediscovered it, because there's like obviously bandits and whatnot, but there's also infected, including a bloater that's just completely removed in favor of one guy hits him. And it's like when he falls on that rebar after a scuffle, there's a whole like element of, can I get out of here? I mean, he's like, as the character, you're struggling to like still shoot and exchange fire and get out, get outside, get on the horse. Like that's a whole like difficult procedure, element of the game that I really enjoyed. And I kind of wish that this was a longer episode to incorporate some of that. I understand why they like took out all of that. It's like, it's not really about the action. It's about the emotional drama. It's about character development.
Yes.
I get that.
Which was very important.
I respect that. Believe me, I get it. But there's a part of me that just can't help but wish that there was some of that action still in there, because it's so harrowing in the game. Obviously, like, he's not a superhero. That would have killed him if he fell off, and fell on some rebar. That could just kill you, right? But it was still such a great moment in the game because it's so unexpected. Like, Joel gets up and you're expecting him to just get up, but there's a rebar in him and he's having trouble doing everything now. That's interesting, but they just condense it down to this little thing, and then he passes out on the ride. Yeah,
but he still relied on Ellie a lot because she had to help him out, and the whole time when they were running away on the horse, she was like shooting those guys as well.
Yeah, okay, so that's another thing. Okay, I'm glad you said that. In the game, when you're trying to get away, she actually helps like to shoot a guy or something like that, or pull his attention away by shooting so that Joel can shoot the guy. Whereas in the show, she's just kind of aimlessly.
Well, I think that also kind of feeds into the whole thing where at the beginning she's saying to him like, won't you teach me? Won't you teach me?
Yeah.
And he doesn't, in order to keep her still reliant on him, right?
That's true.
And then by the end of the episode, she's there taking charge and she's protecting him. And
Correct.
so it's like a little interesting turn. The whole thing that we're seeing here with the effects of Joel's past and how that's giving him anxiety and panic attacks, and now he's got PTSD, was really interesting for his character.
Yeah.
Because it just like shows you the type of guy he is, and also living in that world where you're constantly fighting for survival, you conveniently don't have the time to kind of get into your feelings and kind of sort them out,
Sure.
because that is a luxury that you can't do when you're in survival mode all the time. All of those emotions that have been locked away in a tight little box start coming back out now that he's seeing families and he's seeing his brother and his brother having a baby and all of that, and it's just like poof, everything.
I do like how the show has improved upon the story from the game in a number of ways. In reviewing that section of the game again, like I said, I was like, oh wow, the show is actually making this better in so many areas. I just wish they included some of that action. Because it's just like, oh, the action was so good in some of those sections that's just gone. Like the raid at the by the bandits at the dam. It's more the one at the university that was really quite interesting.
I think that they just try and be sparing with the action, and I've noticed this, that there's this pattern where like there's one episode that is dedicated to the emotional drama and all of that, and usually you won't see a single infected in that episode, and then it'll move on, and the next episode will be one where like something crazy happens.
So it's TikTok.
It's like it's TikTok. So I think, and I haven't seen the preview for next week, so I don't know, but I think there's going to be some crazy stuff happening next week.
There is going to be some crazy stuff. Yes. No, absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully you guys are too. I apologize if anybody's annoyed by my comparing with the game. I just can't help it. I have this hyper analytical brain, and it's like these fleeting moments of the game start popping up into my head while I'm watching the show. I'm like, wait a second, that's just like the game, or that's totally different. And then I had to like go in and deep dive and research and all that stuff because it's just cool,
Yeah.
It's cool to see what they changed and what they improved upon, what they went worse with. But overall, it was a strong episode. I liked it a lot. You guys, thanks so much for hanging out. Hopefully you enjoyed this. I'm Jabby Kawai. This is
ACHARA KIRK.
Peace out.